The year was 2147. Earth had long since outgrown its cradle. Humanity now stretched across dozens of star systems, claiming planets and moons as their own. They were no longer just explorers or settlers. They were conquerors. To the rest of the galaxy, humans were known as Deathworlders, a name earned through centuries of relentless expansion and brutal conflicts. Their reputation was fearsome, and their fleets inspired dread. In orbit around Earth's moon sat Hanul 3, one of humanity's most advanced space stations. It served as both a research hub and a military command center. Inside one of the station's quieter labs, a man named Jin Ho worked late into the night. He was slim, with glasses that slid down his nose whenever he leaned over his desk too far. His dark hair stuck up in odd places from running his fingers through it repeatedly. Jin Ho wasn't a soldier or a politician. He was a xenolinguist, someone trained to decode languages from alien species. Most days, his job felt pointless because humanity rarely encountered intelligent life willing to talk. But tonight, something unusual had caught his attention. For weeks, strange signals had been drifting into Hanul 3's receivers. At first, they seemed like random bursts of static, background noise left over from cosmic phenomena. However, Jin Ho noticed patterns within the chaos. The signals repeated at regular intervals, almost like a message. Could it be an actual communication from an alien civilization? Jin Ho spent hours poring over data, isolating frequencies, and piecing together fragments of sound. Slowly but surely, he began to make progress. The signal contained layers. Some parts sounded mechanical, while others carried tones that suggested speech. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to intrigue him further. When he finally deciphered the clearest segment, his heart skipped a beat. Help us. Dying. Our world. Those words sent shivers down his spine. Was this real? Or was it some kind of trick? Jin Ho knew better than to jump to conclusions. Alien encounters didn't always end well for either side. Still, the possibility of helping another intelligent species filled him with hope. For years, humanity had been looking outward, seeking connection among the stars. This could be their chance. He reported his findings to Admiral Sung Tae, the commanding officer stationed aboard Hanul 3. The admiral was a tall man with sharp features and an even sharper mind. His uniform bore medals earned during countless battles, each one marking victories won through strategy and force. Seung Tai listened carefully as Jin Ho explained the nature of the signal. "It's possible," Jin Ho said, pushing his glasses back up his nose nervously, "that we've intercepted a genuine distress call. If so, we have a responsibility to respond." Seung Tai frowned. "Or it could be a trap. You know how many civilizations would love to lure us into a false sense of security? We can't afford to let our guard down." Before Jin Ho could argue, another voice joined the conversation. Yoon Hee, a pragmatic and highly respected fleet officer, stepped forward. She had short black hair cut close to her head and piercing eyes that missed nothing. Her presence commanded respect, even from someone as high-ranking as Admiral Sung Tae. "We need more information before making any decisions," she said firmly. "If this is real, then yes, we should help. But if it's not..." She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Jin Ho nodded reluctantly. He understood their caution. Humanity's history with aliens hadn't exactly been peaceful. Many species saw them as invaders, and many more simply feared their power. Yet, deep down, he believed there was still good in humanity. Surely they couldn't ignore a plea for help without at least investigating. Over the next few days, Jin Ho worked tirelessly to refine the translation. With the help of advanced algorithms and linguistic databases, he managed to extract more phrases from the signal. Words like collapse, atmosphere, and survivors appeared frequently. These clues painted a grim picture, a dying planet, struggling to sustain life. The urgency in the message grew clearer with every passing hour. Meanwhile, Yoon Hee led reconnaissance teams to analyze potential destinations based on the signal's origin. Using triangulation techniques, they pinpointed a distant star system, located near the edge of explored space. Traveling there would take months, even with hyperspace technology. Still, preparations began immediately. Ships were loaded with supplies, weapons, and scientific equipment. Troops trained for various scenarios ranging from rescue missions to full-scale combat. Throughout all this, Jinho found himself torn between excitement and anxiety. On one hand, he dreamed of meeting the beings who sent the signal. What did they look like? How did they live? Did they share humanity's curiosity about the universe? On the other hand, he worried about what might happen if things went wrong. Would humanity's fears get the better of them again? Would they approach these aliens with open hands or closed fists? As the launch date approached, tensions aboard. Hanel 3 ran high. Some crew members whispered about glory and discovery, imagining themselves as heroes saving a doomed race. Others muttered warnings about traps and betrayal, urging caution above all else. Admiral Sung-Tai remained stoic, weighing every decision carefully. Yoon-hee kept a watchful eye on everyone, ensuring discipline didn't falter under pressure. Finally, the day arrived. The fleet assembled outside the station, engines humming softly as they awaited departure orders. Jinho stood on the observation deck staring out at the vast expanse of stars. Beside him, Yoon-hee crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "You really think this is worth the risk?" she asked quietly. Jinho hesitated before answering. "I don't know. But I do know that turning away would mean giving up on something important. Maybe this is our chance to show the galaxy that we're not just conquerors, that we can be saviors too." Yoon-hee didn't reply. Instead, she turned her gaze toward the ships lined up in formation. Each vessel represented humanity's strength and its capacity for destruction. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain. This mission would change everything. With a final nod from Admiral Sung-tae, the fleet launched into hyperspace, leaving behind the safety of known territory. Ahead of them lay uncertainty, danger, and perhaps redemption. Only time would tell whether they were heading toward salvation or disaster. Months passed as the fleet traveled through the cold vastness of space. The journey was long and quiet, filled with anticipation and unease. The ships moved in formation, their sleek hulls glinting faintly under the artificial lights of hyperspace engines. Inside, the crew went about their routines, training, maintaining equipment, and preparing for whatever awaited them at the end of their voyage. For many, this mission felt like stepping into the unknown. No one knew what they would find when they reached the source of the signal. Jinho spent most of his time in the science lab aboard the flagship, Gaia's Wrath. He reviewed the data from the signal over and over again, trying to piece together more clues about the aliens who had sent it. His workspace was cluttered with holographic displays, showing fragments of decoded messages and star maps marking their destination. Despite his excitement, Jinho couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The signal's wording was desperate but vague, almost as if it had been intentionally simplified. Was it meant to appeal to basic emotions? Or was there another reason behind its simplicity? Yoon-hee, on the other hand, focused on strategy. As a fleet officer, her job was to ensure the mission succeeded without unnecessary risks. She led briefings with her team, going over possible scenarios, rescue operations, diplomatic meetings, or even combat situations. Her sharp eyes scanned every detail, looking for weaknesses in their plans. Though she didn't say it aloud, Yoon-hee shared Admiral Seung-tae's concerns. Something about the signal felt too convenient, too easy to intercept. What if it wasn't a genuine plea for help? What if it was bait? Eventually, the fleet emerged from hyperspace near their destination, a distant star system located at the edge of explored space. At its center floated a single planet, glowing faintly blue against the blackness of space. The sight took everyone's breath away. Even Yoon-hee, usually so composed, found herself staring in awe. The planet was breathtakingly beautiful. Its surface shimmered with bioluminescent forests that pulsed softly in rhythmic patterns, like a living heartbeat. Towering crystalline structures jutted out of the ground, reflecting light in dazzling colors. Rivers of liquid silver snaked across the landscape, twisting and turning like veins carrying lifeblood. It was unlike anything humanity had ever seen before. But there was also an eerie stillness to the scene. No signs of movement, no visible cities or machinery, just silence. Something's wrong. Yoon-hee muttered under her breath as she studied the planet through the ship's viewport. It's too quiet. Admiral Seung-tae nodded grimly. Send down probes first. Let's get a clearer picture before we commit any personnel. Small, unmanned drones were launched toward the planet's surface. They scanned the area, collecting data on atmospheric conditions, terrain, and potential hazards. Back aboard the flagship, scientists analyzed the results. The atmosphere was breathable but unstable, filled with strange particles that seemed to disrupt electronic signals. The ground was covered in organic compounds, suggesting a highly advanced ecosystem, or what remained of one. Then came the discovery that changed everything. As the drones explored deeper into the planet, they encountered beings. Ethereal, figures made of translucent light drifted among the ruins of massive structures. They moved gracefully, almost weightlessly, their forms shifting and changing with each step. These weren't machines or constructs, they were alive. They're here, Jin-ho whispered, his voice trembling with excitement. We found them. The crew gathered around the main monitor, watching footage of the mysterious creatures. They didn't resemble humans or any known alien species. Instead, they seemed to exist somewhere between matter and energy, radiating an otherworldly glow. Their faces, if they could even be called that, were smooth and featureless, yet somehow expressive. When they communicated, it wasn't through sound, but through bursts of color and emotion transmitted directly into the minds of those observing them. They're telepathic, Jin-ho realized, his eyes wide with wonder. That's why the signal was so fragmented. It wasn't meant for us. We're not equipped to understand it fully. Despite the breakthrough, Yoon-hee remained cautious. How do we know they're friendly? She asked sharply. Just because they look harmless doesn't mean they are. Her skepticism wasn't unfounded. Humanity's past encounters with alien life often ended in violence. Many species viewed humans as invaders, while others saw them as threats due to their reputation as conquerors. Trust didn't come easily in the galaxy. To bridge the gap, Jin-ho devised a plan. Using the fragments of the signal he had decoded earlier, he created a simple message of his own, an introduction in universal terms. Symbols representing peace, cooperation, and survival were broadcasted toward the planet's surface. Then, they waited. Hours ticked by with no response. Doubts began to creep in. Had they misinterpreted the situation entirely? Were the aliens ignoring them? Or worse, preparing to attack? Finally, just as hope started to fade, the beings responded. Through the drone's cameras, the crew watched as the glowing figures gathered in a clearing. One of them stepped forward, raising a shimmering appendage. Colors swirled around it, forming patterns that matched the symbols Jin-ho had sent. It was a reply, a tentative acknowledgement of humanity's presence. We've made contact, Jin-ho said, his voice thick with emotion. This is it. This is history. But Yoon-hee wasn't celebrating. She studied the footage closely, noting how the beings interacted with their environment. There was something fragile about them, almost vulnerable. Yet, beneath that fragility lay hints of power, energy signatures that suggested capabilities, far beyond human understanding. We need to proceed carefully, she warned. These creatures may look weak, but appearances can be deceiving. Admiral Seung-tae agreed. A small landing party was assembled, including Jin-ho and Yoon-hee, along with a contingent of soldiers armed with non-lethal weapons. Their goal was simple: establish communication, assess the situation, and determine whether the aliens truly needed help or posed a threat. When they arrived on the planet's surface, the air felt heavy, charged with static electricity. The glowing beings approached cautiously, their movements slow and deliberate. Jin-ho stepped forward, holding up a device designed to translate their telepathic language into something comprehensible. "Hello," he said softly, though he doubted spoken words would carry meaning. "We heard your call. We've come to help." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a wave of sensation washed over the group. Images, emotions, and impressions flooding their minds. Pain, loss, desperation. The beings were showing them their story, sharing memories of a once thriving civilization brought to ruin by internal conflict. "They're telling us their world is dying," Jin-ho explained, tears welling up in his eyes. "Their ecosystem collapsed after centuries of war. They tried to rebuild, but it was too late. That's why they sent the signal, to warn others and ask for aid. Yoon-hee frowned, her instincts screaming that something wasn't adding up. If these beings were so advanced, why hadn't they fixed their own problems? Why rely on outsiders for help? And why now, when humanity had only recently expanded into this region of space? She voiced her concerns to Admiral Sung-tae via comlink. "Sir, I recommend running additional scans. Something about this feels off." Back aboard the flagship, teams worked frantically to gather more information. Sensors detected traces of ancient technology buried beneath the planet's surface, remnants of the aliens' former glory. Some readings indicated defensive systems, dormant but still functional. Could they be using us to reactivate their weapons? Yoon-hee wondered aloud. Jin-ho shook his head. "I don't think so. Look at them. They're barely holding on. If they wanted to fight, they wouldn't have shown us their weakness." Yet doubt lingered. Humanity's history taught them to expect betrayal. Every encounter with alien life carried the risk of misunderstanding, or worse, hostility. As night fell on the alien world, the landing party returned to their ships, leaving the glowing beings behind. Back aboard Gaia's Wrath, debates raged over the next course of action. Should they offer assistance, risking resources and lives? Or should they retreat, preserving humanity's strength? In the end, Admiral Sung-tae decided to stay for now. But he issued strict orders. No further contact until all questions were answered. Jin-ho retired to his quarters, exhausted but exhilarated. He stared out the window at the glowing planet below, his mind racing with possibilities. For the first time in years, he felt hopeful. Maybe humanity could rise above its violent past. Maybe they could become something better. But as sleep claimed him, he couldn't shake the nagging thought that echoed in the back of his mind. What if they were wrong? What if helping these beings wasn't the right choice? Only time would tell. The days that followed were filled with tension. The landing party continued their cautious exploration of the alien planet, now identified as Zitharus Prime. Jin-ho worked tirelessly to deepen communication with the glowing beings, whom he had come to call the Zitherians. Every interaction was a delicate dance, fraught with misunderstandings and moments of clarity. The Zitherians communicated not through words, but through emotions, colors, and fleeting images projected directly into the minds of those around them. It was beautiful and maddeningly difficult to interpret. Jin-ho spent hours trying to decode their messages, piecing together fragments of their story. From what he could gather, the Zitherians had once been a highly advanced civilization, thriving in harmony with their environment. But centuries ago, internal conflicts tore them apart. Wars over resources and ideologies ravaged their world, leaving scars that never healed. Their once stable ecosystem collapsed, poisoned by the remnants of their own technology. Now they clung to survival, using what little power remained to sustain themselves while hoping for salvation from beyond the stars. "They're victims," Jin-ho told Yoon-hee one evening as they reviewed data back aboard Gaia's Wrath. "They didn't lure us here to fight. They really need help." Yoon-hee wasn't convinced. She sat across from him, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her sharp eyes scanned the holographic displays showing energy readings from beneath the planet's surface. "I don't doubt they're suffering," she said slowly, choosing her words carefully. "But we can't ignore these readings. Something down there is still active. Something big." She pointed to a cluster of red markers on the map. "These energy signatures match patterns we've seen in defensive systems before. If they're not weapons, then what are they?" Jin-ho sighed, rubbing his temples. He understood her concerns, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were misinterpreting the situation. "Maybe it's infrastructure," he suggested. "Power grids or environmental stabilizers left over from their golden age. Just because it looks like a weapon doesn't mean it is." Yoon-hee shook her head. "We can't take that risk. Admiral Sung-tae agrees. We need to investigate further before committing any more resources." The next morning, a team of engineers and scientists led by Yoon-hee descended to the planet's surface again. This time, their goal was to explore the underground structures flagged by the scans. Armed soldiers accompanied them, ready for anything. Jin-ho stayed behind, focusing on refining the translation device he hoped would bridge the gap between human and Zetherian communication. As the team ventured deeper into the ruins, they discovered tunnels carved into the crystalline bedrock. The walls shimmered faintly, pulsing with a soft glow that seemed almost alive. Strange symbols etched into the stone glowed brighter as they passed, reacting to their presence. It was awe-inspiring, but also unsettling. "This place feels wrong," muttered Private Dae-Jun, one of the soldiers guarding the group. His grip tightened on his rifle as he scanned the shadows. "Like it's watching us." Yoon-hee ignored him. She trusted her instincts, and right now they screamed caution. The air grew heavier the deeper they went, thick with static electricity that made their hair stand on end. Sensors flickered unpredictably, struggling to function in the strange environment. Finally, they reached a massive chamber at the heart of the complex. In its center stood a towering structure, a machine unlike anything they'd ever seen. Its surface rippled like liquid metal, shifting and reforming as if alive. Energy crackled around it, casting eerie reflections on the walls. "What is this thing?" whispered Engineer Hyasun, her voice trembling with awe and fear. Before anyone could answer, the machine activated. A low hum filled the chamber, growing louder until it vibrated through their bones. Lights flashed, and the symbols on the walls flared brightly. Then, without warning, beams of light shot out, scanning the intruders. "Take cover!" Yoon-hee shouted, diving behind a nearby pillar. The soldiers raised their weapons, though none dared fire. They didn't know whether the machine was friend or foe. For several agonizing minutes, the machine analyzed them. When it finally powered down, the room fell silent. Everyone held their breath, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Nothing did. "Well," Yoon-hee said dryly as she stood up, brushing dust off her uniform. "That was helpful." Back aboard the flagship, the discovery sparked heated debates. Admiral Seung-tae called an emergency meeting to discuss the implications. Jin-ho argued passionately that the machine was evidence of the Zetherians' former greatness, not a threat. "It must have been part of their infrastructure," he insisted. "A system to maintain their atmosphere or regulate their biosphere." Yoon-hee countered, pointing to the erratic behavior of the machine during their encounter. "It scanned us like it was assessing us," she said. "What if it's deciding whether we're a threat? What if activating it triggers defenses we don't understand?" Admiral Seung-tae listened carefully to both sides before making his decision. "We'll send another probe to study the machine remotely," he announced. "But until we know more, no one goes near it again." Meanwhile, tensions escalated among the crew. Rumors spread about the mission being a mistake, fueled by fears of walking into a trap. Some argued that humanity should cut its losses and leave Zetheris Prime behind. Others believed they owed it to the Zetherians to help, regardless of the risks. Jin-ho found himself caught in the middle. He wanted to trust the Zetherians, but even he couldn't deny the mounting evidence against them. The energy signatures, the dormant defenses, the cryptic nature of their communication, all of it painted a picture of uncertainty. Yet every time he looked into the glowing forms of the Zetherians, he saw desperation, not malice. One night, unable to sleep, Jin-ho wandered onto the observation deck. To his surprise, he found Yoon-hee there, staring out at the glowing planet below. She glanced at him briefly before turning her gaze back to the stars. "You look troubled," she said flatly. Jin-ho hesitated, then nodded. "I keep thinking about the Zetherians. What if we're wrong about them? What if helping them could change how the galaxy sees us?" Yoon-hee let out a bitter laugh. "Or what if helping them gets us all killed? You've seen the reports. That machine isn't just sitting there, it's waiting." "But what if it's waiting to be fixed?" Jin-ho pressed. "What if it's the key to saving their world?" Yoon-hee didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned to face him fully, her expression unreadable. "Do you really believe that? Or are you just hoping it's true?" Her question hit hard. Jin-ho opened his mouth to reply, but no words came. Deep down, he knew she had a point. Hope wasn't enough. Not when lives were on the line. The following day, disaster struck. While analyzing new data from the probes sent to study the machine, technicians detected a sudden spike in energy output. Before anyone could react, the Machine activated again, this time on its own. Bright beams of light shot skyward, piercing the clouds and disrupting communications across the fleet. Alarms blared as ships struggled to maintain control. On the surface, the Zetharians reacted violently. Their normally peaceful demeanor shattered as they swarmed toward the landing site, surrounding the humans. Colors flashed wildly around them, conveying anger, fear, and confusion. For the first time, the glowing beings seemed hostile. Panic erupted among the crew. Soldiers raised their weapons, unsure whether to defend themselves or retreat. Yunhee barked orders, trying to restore order. "Stand down!" she shouted. "Don't provoke them!" But it was too late. Miscommunications spiraled into chaos. When a soldier accidentally discharged his weapon, whether out of fear or error, the Zetharians retaliated. Waves of energy surged toward the humans, knocking them off their feet. The battle had begun. Back aboard Gaia's Wrath, Admiral Seung-tae watched the unfolding carnage with grim determination. "Enough," he growled. "If they won't surrender, we'll make them regret resisting." He gave the order to launch plasma bombs, targeting the underground structures where the machine was located. As the fleet unleashed its firepower, explosions rocked Zetheris Prime, scorching the land and shattering the crystalline towers. The bioluminescent forests dimmed, their lights extinguished under clouds of ash and smoke. Jin-Ho watched in horror as the planet burned. "No," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "What have we done?" Yunhee stood beside him, her jaw clenched tight. She had warned against trusting the Zetharians, but seeing the destruction unfold left her hollow inside. Somewhere, along the way, humanity's caution had turned into cruelty. By the time the bombardment ended, Zetheris Prime lay in ruins. The Zetharians were gone, wiped out by the very people they had hoped would save them. All that remained were charred landscapes and shattered dreams. In the aftermath, guilt consumed the survivors. Jin-Ho refused to leave the planet, insisting on staying behind to document what little remained of the Zetharian culture. To everyone's surprise, Yunhee volunteered to join him, seeking redemption for her role in escalating the conflict. As the fleet departed, leaving the two Deathworlders alone amidst the ruins, Jin-Ho knelt beside a fragment of glowing crystal. He placed a hand on its cool surface, feeling the faint pulse of energy within. "We can't undo what happened," Yunhee said softly, standing beside him. "But maybe we can learn." The fleet was gone. The roar of engines had faded into the cold silence of space, leaving behind only destruction and despair. Jin-Ho and Yunhee stood alone on the surface of Zetheris Prime, surrounded by the ruins of a once thriving civilization. The air was heavy with ash, and the bioluminescent forests that had once pulsed with life were now dark and lifeless. Even the crystalline structures, which had shimmered like jewels under the alien sun, lay shattered and dull. Jin-Ho knelt beside a fragment of glowing crystal, his fingers brushing its cool surface. It still emitted a faint pulse of energy, though it was weak, like the last breaths of a dying creature. He closed his eyes, trying to imagine what this place must have looked like before humanity arrived. The images came slowly, pieced together from the fragments of communication he had decoded, and the memories shared by the Zetharians. Once, this world had been vibrant and alive, a symphony of light and color, harmony and balance. Now it was a graveyard. Yunhee watched him silently, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her expression was unreadable, but her posture betrayed, the weight pressing down on her shoulders. She had spent years training for combat, preparing for threats both real and imagined. But nothing could have prepared her for this. The knowledge that her actions, her decisions, had contributed to the annihilation of an entire species. "What do we do now?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Jin-Ho didn't answer immediately. He took a deep breath, letting the question hang in the air between them. What could they do? The Zetharians were gone, their culture erased in a matter of hours. All that remained were fragments, ruins, artifacts, and memories. Yet, even in the face of such overwhelming loss, Jin-Ho felt a flicker of determination. If they couldn't undo the past, perhaps they could preserve something for the future. "We document everything," he said at last, his voice steady despite the tears welling up in his eyes. We record every detail. Their language, their art, their history. Whatever we can find. If we can't save them, at least we can remember them. Yoon-hee nodded slowly. It wasn't much, but it was something. And in the wake of such devastation, even small acts carried meaning. Over the next few weeks, Jin-ho and Yoon-hee worked tirelessly to catalog the remnants of Zitharian civilization. They scoured the ruins, collecting artifacts and taking holographic scans of the damaged landscapes. Some days, they uncovered treasures, delicate sculptures made of light, intricate carvings etched into stone, and musical instruments that hummed softly when touched. Other days, they found nothing but ash and debris, reminders of the destruction wrought by humanity's fear and arrogance. Despite the grim nature of their task, Jin-ho couldn't help but marvel at the sophistication of Zitharian culture. Their art was breathtaking, filled with layers of meaning that went beyond simple aesthetics. Their technology, though largely destroyed, hinted at a level of advancement far beyond anything humanity had achieved. And their philosophy, as best as Jin-ho could reconstruct it, emphasized unity and balance, not just among themselves, but with the natural world around them. They weren't just survivors, Jin-ho said one evening as they sat together inside their makeshift camp. They were creators, builders, dreamers. Yoon-hee stared into the fire they had built, its orange glow casting flickering shadows across her face. "And we destroyed them," she said flatly. "All because we assumed the worst." Her words hung heavily in the air. They had debated the ethics of their mission countless times since arriving on Zitharus Prime, but the truth was unavoidable. Humanity had acted out of fear, interpreting caution as hostility and misunderstanding as malice. In doing so, they had confirmed the very fears that had driven the Zitharians to send their desperate plea for help in the first place. "Do you think they knew?" Jin-ho asked after a long pause. "That reaching out might lead to this?" Yoon-hee shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe. Their signal contained warnings about us, about our violent tendencies, but they reached out anyway." "Why?" "Hope," Jin-ho replied simply. "Maybe they thought we'd changed, or maybe they believed we were worth the risk." Neither spoke for a while. The crackling of the fire filled the silence, punctuated by the distant howl of wind sweeping through the ruins. Outside their shelter, Zitharus Prime stretched endlessly, its beauty tarnished but not entirely lost. As they delved deeper into the ruins, Jin-ho began to piece together more of the Zitharians' story. Through fragments of telepathic messages and symbols etched into stone, he learned about their golden age, a time when their world had thrived under the careful stewardship of its inhabitants. They had harnessed the power of their environment without exploiting it, creating a society that existed in perfect harmony with nature. But then came the wars. Fueled by greed and ideological differences, the Zitharians turned against each other, unleashing weapons that poisoned their atmosphere and destabilized their ecosystem. By the time the conflicts ended, their world was already dying. Generations later, they were reduced to mere shadows of their former selves, clinging to survival while searching for a way to heal their planet. They tried to fix things, Jin-ho explained to Yoon-hee as they examined a partially intact control panel embedded in the ground. This machine, it wasn't a weapon. It was part of their effort to stabilize the atmosphere. That's why it activated when we approached. It was scanning us, trying to determine if we could help. Yoon-hee frowned. So we attacked them for trying to save themselves. "It gets worse," Jin-ho admitted. His voice trembled slightly as he continued. "Their message, the SOS, they included warnings about us, yes. But they also hoped we'd see their plight as a reflection of our own. A reminder of where unchecked aggression leads." Yoon-hee stared at him, her expression unreadable. "You mean they wanted to warn us?" Jin-ho nodded. "Not just warn us. Change us. Show us there's another way." The realization hit them both like a punch to the gut. The Zitharians hadn't just been asking for help, they had been offering it. Their plea wasn't just about survival, it was about redemption, for themselves and for humanity. Days turned into weeks, and the work grew harder. Supplies dwindled, forcing Jinho and Yoon-hee to ration food and water. The environment, already harsh, became increasingly hostile as storms swept across the planet, stirring up clouds of toxic dust. Yet neither of them considered leaving. Every artifact they salvaged, every fragment of knowledge they preserved, felt like a step toward making amends. One day, while exploring a particularly deep section of the ruins, they stumbled upon something unexpected. Hidden beneath layers of rubble was a chamber untouched by the bombardment. Inside, they found a single Zitharian, a survivor. The being was frail, its translucent form flickering weakly like a dying flame. It hovered silently, radiating, waves of sorrow and exhaustion. When it noticed Jinho and Yoon-hee, it extended a shimmering appendage, projecting images directly into their minds. "You are Lysira," Jinho whispered, recognizing the name from earlier translations. She, or rather it, was one of the Zitharian elders, a keeper of knowledge and wisdom. Lysira's message was fragmented but clear enough. She showed them visions of her people's final moments, the confusion and terror as bombs rained down from the sky. She revealed the truth about the signal. It had been sent not just as a cry for help, but as a test of humanity's capacity for compassion and restraint. "And we failed," Jinho murmured, tears streaming down his face. Lysira nodded sadly. Then, with her remaining strength, she offered one final gift. She projected a stream of data into Jinho's translation device, containing everything she could salvage of Zitharian culture. Their language, their art, their philosophy. It was a legacy, entrusted to two strangers who represented the species responsible for their extinction. When the transfer was complete, Lysira's form dimmed further until it disappeared altogether. She was gone, leaving behind only silence and the weight of her sacrifice. Back at their camp, Jinho and Yoon-hee reviewed the data Lysira had given them. It was vast, far more than either of them had expected. Hours turned into days as they sifted through the information, uncovering new insights into Zitharian society. Each discovery brought fresh waves of grief, but also hope. Hope that humanity could learn from this tragedy, that they could grow beyond the cycle of violence and mistrust that had defined them for so long. "We'll publish this," Jinho said one night, staring at the stars through the thinning haze of ash. "Everything we've found. Let the galaxy see what we've done, and what we've lost." Yoon-hee nodded. "Maybe it'll make a difference. Maybe someone will listen." For the first time in weeks, a small smile tugged at the corners of Jinho's lips. "We owe it to them," he said softly. "To Lysira. To all of them." The road ahead would be long and difficult. There would be no quick fixes, no easy answers. But as they stood amidst the ruins of Zithris Prime, two Deathworlders vowed to ensure that humanity's next chapter wouldn't end in ashes. Months passed on Zithris Prime. The planet remained silent, its once vibrant life reduced to ruins and ash. Jinho and Yoon-hee had grown accustomed to the loneliness, their days filled with painstaking work as they documented every fragment of Zitharian culture they could find. Their supplies were running dangerously low, but neither of them spoke about leaving. They felt a duty to stay, to honor the memory of the beings who had trusted humanity enough to cry out for help, only to be met with destruction. Jinho's translation device became his constant companion. It held the legacy of Lysira and her people, their language, their art, their history. He spent hours poring over the data, piecing together fragments of meaning from the telepathic messages and symbols left behind. Each discovery was both a triumph and a wound, revealing more about the beauty and tragedy of the Zitharians. Their philosophy in particular struck a chord deep within him. They had believed in unity, not just among themselves, but with the universe itself. They saw existence as a delicate balance, one that required care and respect, rather than domination. Yoon-hee, meanwhile, focused on practical matters. She repaired equipment, rationed food, and kept watch for any signs of danger. Though her skills as a soldier seemed useless now, she adapted, finding ways to contribute to their mission. At night, when the wind howled through the ruins and the fire crackled softly between them, She often found herself reflecting on what they had done and what they had lost. "We can't fix this," she said one evening, staring into the flames. "No matter how much we document or preserve, it won't bring them back." Jin-Ho looked up from his notes, his face lined with exhaustion. "I know," he replied quietly, "but maybe it'll stop us from making the same mistake again." Yoon-hee didn't respond immediately. She leaned back against a fallen pillar, her gaze fixed on the stars visible through gaps in the clouds. "Do you think anyone will care? Back home, I mean? Will they listen to what we have to say?" Jin-Ho hesitated before answering. Humanity wasn't known for its willingness to reflect on its mistakes. For centuries, they had expanded across the galaxy, driven by ambition and fear. Compassion and restraint were luxuries rarely afforded to those labeled as threats. Yet, even in the darkest moments, there were always voices calling for change, people who believed humanity could rise above its violent past. "We'll make them care," Jin-Ho said finally. "If nothing else, we owe it to the Zetherians to try." The process of compiling their findings was slow and grueling. Jin-Ho wrote tirelessly, translating Zetherian concepts into terms humans could understand. He described their art, their music, and their way of life, hoping to convey the depth of what had been lost. Yoon-hee helped too, contributing her perspective, as someone who had initially doubted the Zetherians' intentions. Together they created a detailed account of the mission, not just the events that had unfolded, but the lessons they had learned. Their report, titled "One Mistake," was unlike anything humanity had seen before. It wasn't just a record of failure, it was a plea for transformation. Through images, recordings, and written accounts, Jin-Ho and Yoon-hee painted a picture of a civilization destroyed not by malice, but by misunderstanding. They highlighted the warnings embedded in the Zetherians' signal, showing how humanity's fears had blinded them to the truth. When the manuscript was complete, they transmitted it to Admiral Seong-tae aboard the fleet. Along with the report, they included a personal message urging him to share their findings with Earth's leaders and the United Earth Fleet. "This isn't just our story," Jin-Ho wrote. "It's theirs and ours. If we ignore it, we risk repeating the same tragedy." Admiral Seong-tae read the report in silence, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he called an emergency meeting with his senior officers. The discussion was heated, with some arguing that the report should be suppressed to protect humanity's reputation. Others, however, recognized its value, not as propaganda, but as a tool for growth. In the end, Admiral Seong-tae made his decision. One Mistake would be distributed throughout the fleet and sent back to Earth for further review. Its publication would mark the beginning of a new era, one where caution didn't mean hostility and hope wasn't dismissed as weakness. Back on Zithirus Prime, Jin-Ho and Yoon-hee continued their work, unaware of the impact their report was having. Supplies were nearly gone, forcing them to scavenge for food and water among the ruins. The environment grew harsher with each passing day, storms sweeping across the landscape and stirring up clouds of toxic dust. Despite the challenges, they pressed on, determined to leave no stone unturned. One morning, as they explored a previously untouched section of the ruins, they stumbled upon something unexpected. Hidden beneath layers of debris was a small chamber, its walls glowing faintly with residual energy. Inside, they found a holographic projection, a recording left behind by the Zetherians. The image flickered to life, revealing a group of glowing figures standing in a circle. One stepped forward, its form shimmering with light. It began speaking, or rather, projecting emotions and images directly into their minds. The message was simple, yet profound. "To those who come after us," the figure said, "we leave this final gift, not of weapons or defenses, but of understanding. You are not alone in this universe. Your actions ripple outward, shaping worlds beyond your own. Choose wisely, for the path you take defines not only yourselves, but all who follow." The recording ended abruptly, leaving Jin-Ho and Yoon-hee speechless. They stood in silence, absorbing the weight of the message. It was both a farewell and a challenge. an invitation to step beyond fear and embrace the possibility of connection. "That's why they reached out," Jin-Ho said softly. "Not because they thought we'd save them, but because they hoped we'd save ourselves." Yoon-hee nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "And we failed." "Not completely," Jin-Ho countered. "We're still here, still trying." As the days turned into weeks, the effects of their report began to reach them. Messages arrived from the fleet praising their efforts and acknowledging the importance of their work. Admiral Seung-tae personally commended them, promising that humanity would learn from their mistakes. Ships carrying supplies and reinforcements were dispatched to Zetheris Prime, ensuring Jin-Ho and Yoon-hee wouldn't have to endure the harsh conditions alone. Yet even as help arrived, they chose to stay. They couldn't bring themselves to leave the planet just yet. Not while there was still so much to uncover. Every artifact they salvaged, every fragment of knowledge they preserved, felt like a step toward redemption. Over time, one mistake became required reading for every member of the United Earth Fleet. Its lessons echoed through classrooms and training programs, reminding future generations of the cost of arrogance and the power of humility. Images of Zetheris Prime's glowing forests and crystalline towers served as a stark contrast to the desolation wrought by humanity's fear. Slowly but surely, attitudes began to shift. Jin-Ho and Yoon-hee returned to Earth years later, their work on Zetheris Prime complete. They were hailed as heroes, not for their conquests, but for their courage in confronting humanity's darkest impulses. Jin-Ho published a book based on their experiences, expanding on the themes of one mistake. It became a bestseller, sparking debates and discussions across the globe. Yoon-hee, meanwhile, took on a new role within the fleet. She became an advocate for peaceful exploration, pushing for policies that prioritized diplomacy over conflict. Her voice carried weight, shaped by the guilt and grief she carried from Zetheris Prime. Years later, Jin-Ho found himself standing atop a hill overlooking the ruins of a Zetharian city. Beside him, Yoon-hee placed a hand on his shoulder. The wind stirred around them, carrying traces of ash and memories. "We can't undo what happened," she said softly, echoing words spoken long ago. "But maybe we've started to learn." Jin-Ho nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The sun dipped below the jagged skyline, casting the land in hues of orange and red. For a moment, it almost looked alive again. "Maybe," he replied, "and maybe that's enough." As the stars emerged one by one, two Deathworlders stood amidst the ashes of another world, vowing to ensure humanity's next chapter wouldn't end in tragedy.